excited that you represent such a diverse cross-section of our community. Some of you have lived here a few years, many of you more than 20. You represent all of the neighborhoods in town, and you represent business interests, and we're hoping that that really helps shape some good policies in this general plan update. One thing that I remember is during the interview process, you shared something that you loved about Yountville, and I remember what you said, and you loved the small town charm, and the people in the community, and you loved the beauty and look of this town, and the walkability of it. And so this really enthuses me, and it's something I hope we just keep going back to as we move forward. You're here because you love Yountville. And I could go on about the general plan, but I'll leave that to one of our consultants tonight. And I'll say that it's simply an old plan, 26 years old, so it's definitely ripe for an update. And that means that we have a lot of work ahead of us. But what I can tell you, or what I hope you understand after tonight, is that staff and the consultant team is really here to help guide you through this effort, to share with you what we know and offer some recommendations. But we really are here to listen from you and then use that information to move forward. So thanks again for coming tonight. We'll now move to introductions.
Are we going to do
Oh,
the
I'm sorry.
administration?
Yes, we need to do that first.
There, and then I'll work on the video.
26 years. 26 years.
Hi everyone. Thank you for
92.
joining me. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Michelle Donnie, Town Clerk for the Town of Yountville, and I'm here to administer the oath of office for you. And what I'm going to have you do, there's a couple things. I'm going to read I'm going to have you stand and raise your right hand, and then when I say using your name after I, so when I say I, state your name, and then I'm going to have you repeat after me in short, small groups to administer your oath. And then at the end, I need you to sign both copies that are there, and then I'll seal them and give one back to you, and then one we'll retain for our records. Okay? All right, if I could have you all please stand and raise your right hand. I do solemnly say your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that you take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter. All right, congratulations. Thanks, everybody. Good job. Did it get turned on? Check the bottom if it didn't get turned on. And I'll collect those from you, and I'm going to try to get this presentation working.
Okay. So we're recording the meetings, which is why I need to use the microphone. And you'll need to use the microphone too. So those microphones that are at the, you six have it. And there's just a little button on it that you push and the light will come on and you'll know that you're on, and then you can shut it off after you've done talking. And then we'll have to pass this mic around so that everybody can talk. So welcome everyone. My name is Christine O'Rourke, and I am one of the consultants on this wonderful team that they've assembled here to work on the general plan, and I'm really excited to be here. I worked on the climate action plan for the town last year, and I worked with Davio And also Joel's wife, Sherry, was on that committee. And it was just a great committee, and I had so much fun working here. I just love the staff. I love the town. It's such a beautiful town. So I'm really, really excited to be back and working on your general plan with you and helping you to kind of preserve what you want to preserve and change whatever you might want to change. So looking forward to that. So we're going to do first the consultant introductions, and I'm just going to ask everybody to introduce themselves, tell a little bit about themselves and what their role is in the general plan. And why don't we start down at that end with Kendall?
Well, hi, everybody. I know most of you. I'm Kendall Flint with Regional Government Services, and I'm managing the public outreach portion of the program. We just finished up the Envision Yountville series, and now we'll be moving forward with our public workshops, hanging out with you here at the TAG meetings, and then also making community presentations and managing the website and all that kind of good stuff. Super excited about being here, having a good time.
Hi, I'm Beth Thompson with DeNovo Planning Group, and we are preparing the existing conditions report and the environmental impact report, and we'll talk about those a few items later into the agenda, but I also am excited to be working with you guys.
I'm Peter Winch. I'm with WRT, and we're working with Christine and with Beth and the whole team. But our aspect of the general plan will be focused on visualizing some of the physical aspects of what the plan will produce on the ground, to make those things sort of come to life for people, what streets might look like, what buildings might look like, as well as producing documents that are accessible and vivid for the general public and the whole community. So I'm also excited to be here. I'm new to Yountville, and it's fun to get to work in a town where there's so evidently an interest in preserving a high quality of environment. Sure.
John Gibbs, Peter's colleague, principal in charge from WRT, and all the things that Peter said about our company and our interests. It's really terrific to support you guys in your vision moving forward. So great to be here.
Thank you. And we also have Steve Flint, who will be sitting here, but he's in the back trying to get some documents printed. We do have this is our first meeting. The rest of them will go a lot smoother, I'm sure, right? So anyway, this is really a great group, and so this consultant team is excellent. So I'm happy that we're all together, working together on this. So what I'd like to do now is go around the room and have you all introduce yourselves. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself, what you love about Yountville, and another question, which my understanding, I wasn't at the meetings, but this is one of the questions that came up at the when you were being interviewed by the council, was what is your top priority that needs to be addressed at the general plan? And I'm told that there were some really interesting responses to that, and I think it might be helpful for you all to hear from each other what your top priorities are. So why don't we start at this end and we'll go around the room.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Susan Wickers, and I've been in Yountville for almost 21 years. But in the Valley for almost 48. Came here very young. And I remember saying to the council that I think I was asked something like, what do you envision in 20 years this town being like? And of course I said that I'm still here. And I just came up with this really short answer: more permanent residents. And I would like this town to really, is that going backwards? Is that unrealistic? But whatever we can do to encourage more of that would be my goal. Otherwise, just making this a town, first of all, for the residents, and then second of all, for the other folks that come here and enjoy it, and that there be a compatibility at many levels.
Good evening as well. My name is Eric Knight. I've lived in Yountville for 28 years. I grew up in Napa. My family had a small hardware store and lumberyard out on Yountville Crossroads, so I kind of grew up around Yountville. But my wife and I moved back in '89 when we were expecting our first child. I worked on the first our last document that we worked on. I was on the Zoning and Design Review Board at that time. Before I served on the Yountville Town Council from '97 to 2005. So I'm looking forward to this process. I love planning, and I guess I told the council that what I've always enjoyed here is just the connection with the community, and it was connecting with residents at events and neighbors and being able to walk and meet people in the community. And I guess I share that same feeling with Susan, that I think we spent a lot of time in the early 90s talking about design and being sure we protected the type of character of housing we wanted, the designs. Now it seems to be the issue seems to really be a concern that we preserve the residential part of that small town residential character, that we have residences and when we have rentals, that we have long-term rental, not short-term rental, and just connecting with the commercial businesses, but doing everything we can to preserve why we live here in a small community, with seeing our neighbors and being with our neighbors. So thank you.
Is this on? Oh, so I don't have to push it? Okay. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Boyd Dennington. I'm a dentist across the street in the V Marketplace. I've been there for 7 years. I've been married for 10 years. My wife she's the one who brought me to the Valley. She grew up in St. Helena, and she has many fond memories of coming to Yountville for gymnastics classes in the old community center. And I have 2 children, ages 3 and 1, and so far we've enjoyed all that Yountville has to offer at the pool and the community center, and that's what and it sounds like a broken record, but that's what I love about Yountville as well. The community feel, the small town charm. It's a lovely town, and I love being a part of it.
Hi everyone, I'm PJ Hudson. I'm probably one of the newer members of the community in Yountville. I've lived here about 3 years. I moved to California about 30 years ago from Michigan. I grew up outside of Detroit. What maybe makes me too a little bit more unique is I've worked for 30 years for VSP. We're an eye care health plan, so I'm not in the restaurant or hotel business or anything. But I love Yountville since I have moved here. I visited here, for the last 20-some years, and I think Michelle touched on some of the things when she talked about the walkability and everything. I just think we have, not only the restaurants and the wine and all of those things that are so evident, but I think the vet's home and so many of the historical aspects I think are so important that we preserve as well. And when I was thinking about, the question about one of the biggest concerns for the general plan is, I think, balancing those needs of the residents, the business, so that we can, ensure that we have a prosperous future, because change is going to come sometimes whether we want it or not. So I think, being in the position of being able to influence how we use that change and leverage it so that we make sure it makes us the best Yountville that we can be and preserve what makes us so special.
Hello everyone, my name's Davio. I've lived here for 21 years. I was on the climate action plan that Christine sort of chaired, and in that process I thought it was really interesting to see how committed people were to thinking a little bit outside the box, but utilizing sort of, I think, a template for what we're about to do, which is to pose a bunch of different ideas, get a bunch of viewpoints, and try to reach a consensus on what makes sense for this community. I worked with East Bay Regional Park District for 38 years in different capacities. I was a supervisor and ended up being a unit manager, supervising, of all things, trails, which is very similar to the Vine Trail. I feel really committed to this sort of sci-fi project that we're going to enter into. And the reason I call it that is because I think we are trying to identify a future based on what we know today. Things are going to change greatly. There's a lot of economy of scale that I think is bound to happen to this town. And I think, and I said this when I was interviewed, I'd rather be one of the people who tried to participate in that future rather than be a grumpy old guy who just complains about the outcome. And one other thing I will add is that I also said at the interview was, when I think about this town, I want all of us, our children, our grandchildren, everyone to feel not like a stranger in this town. And I think that in certain places and in certain ways, it's up to all of us to make sure that this is still a community at the end of the day. And that's why I'm here, because on the Green Team, I really sense that the people I was working with were really committed to that project. So that's why I'm here.
I'm really familiar. Is that better? I'm really familiar with Yountville. First of all, one of the things I said in the interview was I think we're doing so many things right. I mean, Yountville has, when you look at the old general plan, if anybody's ever taken the time to go through that, everything they wanted at that point in time, we've pretty much accomplished, which I think says a lot for our community and also states what we can do in the future as well. Because if we have that kind of power as individuals, then what can we do 20 years, or what can our next 20 years be like? I think, along with everyone else here, about the balance of residential and commercial, trying to find a home for that somehow to make that work. I think there's room for both. I really do believe that. And maybe it would call for incorporating some of the veteran home property and keeping that going as well, but marrying that with our community was one of the ideas that I had. I'm looking forward to working with everyone. This is exciting, and I think we're going to carve out a future that we're all going to be really pleased with.
I'm Verlin Chalmers. I'm a psychotherapist. I came to the Valley in 1972, and I've lived in different cities in the Valley, from Calistoga, St. Helena, Angwin, and now in Rancho, here in where my parents lived. My parents lived there till they died, and I'm living on the same street that they did years ago. So my interest, I've loved this town ever since I first was here, and I love the friendliness of it and all the things that people talk about, the small community and getting to know everybody and the activeness of it and so on. And I'd love to see that continue. And to do that, I think it's going to require balance between all the competing pressures that the town is facing. And so figuring out how to both be inclusive of all those different factions as well as keeping them in balance seems to be important to me.
My name is Joel Breidigam, and my family's been in the Valley since 1902. I got a unique background from both. One was the Adventist hospital background. The other half of the family was the winery half. So kind of a divergent view of things going on. But been in Yountville for about 25 years. Enjoy it, love the town. One thing that I think is for me is a priority as a designer and builder. I have a real strong aversion to monoculture, and especially from a design aesthetics standpoint. So I have some real concerns about the town going forward as we focus, that we don't get so focused on one particular aspects of the town that we lose what we have, whether it be the beauty, the natural beauty of the town, the people. And the people is a huge thing, because even in this room we have such an incredibly diverse background of people that have moved to this town from different areas, different parts of the country. And I think we need to celebrate that. We unfortunately don't have the diversity that for a lot of my growing up years in downtown Oakland, we have a different type of diversity, which we don't have here. But we do have people have come here with a variety of different backgrounds, and even in this group, it seems we have a real varied background, and I really appreciate that.
Hi, I'm Liz Hauer. I've been a weekender in this town for 15 years. Grew up in San Francisco and came to the Napa Valley, I guess, with my parents. Back in the good old days, I can remember being in the Mondavi parking lot. I don't know why, but my husband and I fell in love with the town and knew that when we retired, this is where we wanted to be and where we wanted to live out our life. What I enjoy about this town is what everybody enjoys. It's the people, the incredible creativity and diversity of the people in the town. What I always admire is this sort of blending of the high-low. You can have a billionaire winery owner sitting and talking with his supervisor of the fields and some fabulous retired school teacher, all talking about the same thing and committed to the same thing on a very equal plane. And that's what I enjoy. I enjoy the passion of the people. I think this town, for whatever reason, attracts people that no matter what their background or socioeconomic status, are just very focused on making this a nice place, keeping it a great place, being active in the community. I've never seen so many people so participative in so many different things. When you look at the activities that we have, they're all well attended, they're all done very well, and people are just darn nice. So it's a nice place to live and be. My concern is the balance. I had a career in retail, so I very much understand the businesses that are coming in and why we are enjoying them. They bring a lot of money to our town, and having money and a budget and being profitable and prosperous allows you to do a lot of things. It's no fun being a part of a company or a town that doesn't have money. So how do we preserve that? How do we preserve our ability to attract contributors to our budget so that we can have beautiful parks and great streets and whatever we want, lights in the bocce court. But at the same time, still have a residential community where people will come and live and that are of diverse backgrounds. So we have a huge challenge. I also was inspired to want to be part of this committee by the original or the last general plan committee. I was so blown away by what they were able to put together and the courage that they had to make such big decisions and have big vision. And I just hope that we can do the same thing and that we're not afraid to do that.
Hi, my name is Whitney Diver McAvoy. I run the Yountville Chamber of Commerce. For those of you that know Cindy Saucerman, I replaced her in July of last year. So I've worked in Yountville for a little over a year. My husband and I live in Napa, and we've lived there for a little over 3 years at Silverado. And I went to Sonoma State University, so spent a long time coming to Napa Valley and visiting Yountville very frequently, to the point where we had the opportunity to move to the valley and jumped at it. So we absolutely love it here, and I really concur with what everybody said so far. I think a lot of really positive comments. I'm really encouraged by this group and what we can accomplish, and I don't really remember what I said to the council, but apparently it was okay, so that's great. Some of the things that I love about our town is our community, our close-knit community, how friendly everybody is, how I can walk down the street and run into 3 people I know and catch up with them, and it's kind of like Cheers, where everybody knows your name, I feel like, and I love that, and I think that's really special. Some of the top priorities that I think about when I think about this group is ensuring that Yountville continues to feel authentic. And I think that's really important. You don't want your community or the appearance of your community to feel forced. And then also the balance between tourism and our residents. And for me, that's really important because obviously I represent the business community, and their success is our success. And striking that balance. And I think the last general plan and even town staff and town councils in the past were very forward thinking in what this town needs to be successful from a tourism perspective, and ensuring that we were properly set up to handle those tourists, and then ensuring that we have the money to do the things that we want to do, like lights at the bocce court. So that's super important. And then also the full-time residents, more full-time residents is important to me. And then younger people coming and moving to town so that we have families growing up here, and that their kids can go to Yes and enjoy the pool and the softball fields and things at the Veterans Home. So thank you.
So my name is Carl Johnson. Some of you have already found out about me. Some of the stories are true. Not all of them. I came to this town originally a very long time ago, like in the 80s, 85 I think it was. And it was a nice little town. It was nice, okay? I was not in the area yet. We were out here on a vacation. And that was a nice place. And then, I've been into wine for a really, really long time. And so when I got a chance to move to Silicon Valley, I started coming up to the Napa Valley all the time. And somehow I kept winding up in Yountville. Amazing how that happens. And after a while, matter of fact, it was the Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving in 1999. I came up for the day with my wife, and we had a wonderful time wine tasting at our favorite wineries where we were wine club members. And our plan was to have dinner here and then go home, because that let all the traffic clear out. And we went to Demont-Chandon and had a winemaker's dinner. Not a winemaker's dinner, but wine tasting meal, where they served a little taste with each one of the 7 courses. Our waiter gave us a full glass with each of the 7 courses. So by the end of the evening, I said, I don't think I can drive back down to San Carlos, California tonight. I think we better find a place to stay. This is Friday night after Thanksgiving, folks. So I went to the concierge at the restaurant. I got her to call the Vintage Inn, and they had 1 room left. I said, tell them we're taking it. And we got there, and there were 2 couples waiting to see if we actually showed up. And so we checked in, walked down to Ranch Market, got some basic necessities to be able to spend the night. And you know that little sign on the back of the door at a hotel rooms here? Is it the maximum rate allowable by law to charge for this room is... That's what they charged. And that convinced me I needed to move here, because I was going to keep coming back, and I was going to keep staying in Yountville. I'll be damned if I was going to pay those hotel rates. And 3 months later, we bought a townhouse here. And that was the start of the whole thing. That was in 98. That should be 99. It was 98 when I did the thing. Bought it in 99. By 2000, we knew we were moving here sooner rather than later. We moved in September of 2001, 5 days before 9/11, for those of you who are doing the math, okay? And have loved every minute of it since. Absolutely loved it. I feel like I've done my share to be a part of this community. Several people have mentioned the friendliness and whatnot. And now that I'm no longer working for a living, which is a wonderful thing to not do, okay? I actually have a new boss. I work for Whitney 4 hours a week. I'm down at the Welcome Center on Friday mornings. And after I heard about Envision and came to some of the meetings, I started asking the tourist a question. What brought you to Yountville? The tourists who'd never been here before came because they heard it was a neat place. But the tourists who had been here before and come back, I come back every year. We've been coming here for 17 years. Every year we come. What brings you back? It's the people. It's not the restaurants. It's not the wineries. It's not the hotels. It's the people. So then I started saying, well, what is it about the people in Yountville that make them so attractive to the tourists, so attractive to each other? We all love walking down the street and saying hi to everybody. Walk down the street of Oakland, say hi to everybody, see what happens, okay? Walk down the street of San Carlos, for that matter. It ain't going to happen the way it does here. The question I think we need to get to the bottom of is, what is that magic? What makes that magic happen? Because without it, we lose the tourists. If we lose the tourists, we lose the business. If we lose the business, it's just that long chain. The key is the people coming here. Why they come here? The people. That's the problem we've got to answer out.
Thank you all very much. We really do have a great, diverse group here, so that's wonderful. We were talking, Sandra and I were talking, and we're a little out of order with our agenda. Now, this is a Brown Act committee, and so we do need to do all of the things on our agenda. So we kind of jumped down to number 7, so we're going to back up to number 1. And with our call to order. So our meeting is now called to order. We've done the administration of oath. Now we're going to do a formal roll call. So just have to say here, Joel Brightigam. Here. Verlin Chalmers. This is a good time for me to learn how to pronounce everybody's name. Verlin Chalmers or Chalmers? Chalmers. Verlin Chalmers. Boyd Dennington. Whitney Diver McAvoy, okay. Liz Hauer. Carl Johnson. Eric Knight. Davio Santos. Here. Susan Wickers, okay. And then our alternate members, do we have PJ Hudson? Here. Okay. And Linnea Pina. Here. All right. Excellent. Okay, now we are on to the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everyone could please stand up. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And now item number 5, which is the adoption of the agenda. So I'll need somebody to move that we adopt the agenda, and then I need a second, and then we'll take the vote. So, and do I have a second? Okay, and all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, so the agenda is adopted. Now we will take public comment on any items that are not on the agenda. Individuals are limited to a 5-minute presentation. No action will be taken by the commission as a result of any item that is presented at this time. Do we have any? No? Joe, you're the only one here. No? No comment. Okay. All right. And so now we will go back and resume our meeting where we left off. Okay. So the next thing up here is for a general plan overview, which I'm going to be giving. And this is flickering the screen a little bit, but hopefully
might have to just look at the back one.
Okay, and we have the back one,
Yeah,
so you can
look at
all
that so you don't
look
get
over
nauseous.
here, over my head, or use that one. I'm going to use that one there. So I just want to give you a very brief overview of what a general plan is, how it's structured, kind of dive down into a little bit of details, but I just want you to have an understanding of the document that we are trying to produce at the end of this process. So a general plan is, well, it's been called a roadmap to the future. It's called a constitution of a city or town. I kind of like this definition. A general plan is the overarching document that guides the future growth and development of a town or a city or a county. All local governments have to have a general plan. And it it went backwards on me. That's weird.
Do you want to go forward?
No, I'm just,
Are you at the
it
right
just
slide?
jumped all by itself.
Okay, Curtis can run that for you if you would like him to. Just
Okay. Okay, just stay on this slide for now. Thank you. Okay, so I want to talk about this a little bit. The overarching document. So the general plan of all of the planning documents, everything, it sits on the top. So everything else has to conform to the general plan. So we'll have like a municipal code, which has all the ordinances that are adopted by the town in that. The zoning code is in that. Any other kind of plan, like a specific plan, which might be adopted to kind of, guide the development of like a specific area, like a downtown of a town, would fall underneath the general plan. The climate action plan, a bicycle and pedestrian plan, all of those have to be in conformance with the general plan. And now because the general plan is the overarching document, it's also pretty broad. Our policies, our programs, the goals, they're all broad-based and they're pretty general. We want to leave all of that detail to the actual ordinances or more detailed plans. So that's just something to keep in mind. The document guides the future growth and development of a town. By future, well, general plans used to be adopted about every 10 to 15 years. That's true in Yountville's case. There was the first general plan, and then the next three were revised and done 10 years later. That's more important when the town is young, it's growing and really developing. Nowadays, most general plans are adopted, revised about every 20 years, and that's for a few reasons. First of all, they're very time consuming. I've been involved in general plans that have lasted 10 years just to write a new general plan. They can be time consuming, they can be very expensive as well. But also towns, a lot of our towns and cities are pretty well built out. So what we start planning for is the vacant land, the underutilized land, the areas that might be blighted for some other towns, not Yountville, of course, and looking at maybe issues about increasing density or intensity of buildings. But most of the structure's there already, and that's true here for Yountville. And the future growth and development of a town. The general plan is primarily a land use document, but there are, and everything else is really feeds into that. How are we going to use our land in Yountville? So I did it. Okay, so Yountville was incorporated in 1965, and the first general plan was adopted in 1966. And so at that time, there was really a shift from an agricultural community to a small town. There was about 2,000. Well, in the census in 1970, there was about 2,300 residents here, and we're at 3,000 now. So we've added about 700 since then. That general plan actually, and we lost that one. Okay. That general plan projected 30,000 residents by 1985, if you can imagine that. So the next one was done in 1975. Now I've lost the whole thing. Okay. Sorry, everybody. There it is. So then the next one was done in 1975, and by that time there were a lot of residents that were beginning to feel that the rural character of the town was starting to erode. So the overarching goal of that general plan was to conserve the small town character, scale, and pace of life of Yountville. 10 years later was the next revision, and there it is. And by that time, about half of the land was in vineyards, orchards, or was undeveloped. The land at that time, they wanted to rezone it, and they actually really restricted commercial development even more. So even today, only 5% of the land in Yountville is zoned for commercial development. And then in 1994, there was actually it looks like there had been a lot of growth over those last 10 years, and a lot of that was in what they call planned developments. And so when you read the plan, there's a lot of talk about how the committee had looked at these planned developments and said, we don't want planned developments. Planned developments are very automobile centric. They're kind of self-contained. They don't really have the kind of attachment to the fabric of the general plan. So they wanted to really kind of encourage and go back to the old, what they call the old way of development, which is more of a lot by lot on a grid. And then there was also, again, concern that commercial development will change much of the town. They actually call it a visitor-oriented commercial strip, was what they were afraid of. So, so there were policies then and programs in the general plan to require that commercial development was going to be street and pedestrian oriented, not inward focusing, and also that visitor oriented businesses would also provide some kind of benefit to the community. So they were encouraging local serving commercial, but at the same time acknowledging that there was limited demand for local commercial, local serving commercial, because there just aren't that many residents here. So now we're up to our, as Sandra said, we've been 26 years, and we're now going to be updating the general plan. And we have some kind of overarching goals for this update. First of all, we want it to be an attractive, concise, and easy to read document. I think with WRT on board, it's going to be really attractive. The general plan that we have now is actually pretty well written. I don't know how many of you have actually read it, but it's really well written, but it's a kind of, a document that was done in the 1990s, and it's black and white and a lot of very heavy on the text. So we're going to make this one really attractive, something you'll be proud to put on your cocktail table at the end of the process. We also are going to be, we want to update the goals and the policies and the programs. A lot of the ones that are there they're kind of old. I mean, there's ones that we obviously want to keep, but some of them that we need to look at updating. We also have to look at new state laws that have been passed and make sure we're hitting all of the state requirements. And then we also, as we go through this, we want to make sure that we're only including policies and programs that are within the town's authority and that can be truly actionable over the life of this general plan. Those are really important goals. We are also going to want to address potential infill and change areas, and we'll talk more about those later on. And then finally, and this is kind of probably the most important point, is what we want to do is create a plan that expresses the values and vision of the community. So there's a lot of state law that pertains to general plans, and I can provide you all with a link for the government code where it's all spelled out, everything that we need to do. Essentially, there are 7 required elements for a general plan, and this word "elements" is a little it's a little kind of a fuzzy word. A lot of times, cities and towns take an element to mean like a chapter, but that's not really what was intended by the state law. They're really more like topical areas that need to be covered. And so we can combine elements any way we want. That you often will see like open space and conservation combined into a chapter, and it can still be called an element. Sometimes you'll see one of these requirements that are spread out in other elements as well, and that's all fine. But all of these elements have to be in it. The first one is land use. And land use, we have a land use map. We designate all the different land uses. We have to identify what the intensity and density of development is going to be in those land use designations. In this element as well, we often talk about what kind of design, general guidelines about design of development and uses of development as well. The housing element is the most highly regulated of all of the elements, and this one actually has to be adopted. It has to be revised and adopted. Well, it used to be every 5 years, but we're on an 8-year schedule, and because it's so highly regulated, we have to bring it to. We have to send it to the department. Lost my screen again. Send it to the Department of Housing and State Department of Housing Community Development, where they review it and they find it in compliance with state law. Now, that housing element was adopted last in 2015, And we go through a process, I don't know how familiar everybody is about this, but it's called the regional housing needs. And so all of the cities and towns are given a number of housing units that they have to plan for. They have to make sure that we have enough land that's available and can be developed at appropriate densities. And so Yountville had a requirement for 17 units. So all of that has already been done. It was adopted in 2015. And we're going to have to do it again and adopt a new housing element in 2013. So because we've already been through that process, and it's a very regulated process, 2023, thank you, 2023, we don't want to touch the housing element. We can kind of touch it as like, we know we need to kind of reformat it a little bit and make sure that it looks like the rest of the elements. We're going to be moving a lot of the stuff back into an appendix. But essentially, we don't want to change the policies and programs in the housing element. We're going to have an opportunity to do that again in a few years. The circulation element was also completely revised back in 2015. And that was because the state passed the Complete Streets Act, and the town needed to revise that element in order to conform with the Complete Streets Act, and also in order to make it available, in order to enable it to receive some state transportation funding. So the circulation element, though, we can change, but it's in much better shape probably than some of the other elements. There are some policies, and particularly programs, that are very detailed, and we might want to make them a little bit broader. And there's also some of the programs that have actually been implemented, so we'll delete those. The safety element talks about safety issues in town, so flooding, landslides, which isn't really actually much of an issue, but shaking from earthquakes, for example, fire hazards. And then we also talk about police and fire departments and emergency preparedness. The noise element looks at the noise, both the existing noise here in town and future noise that might happen from development, and how we're going to protect both people living in those new developments and protect them from unnecessary noise, and also the existing residents, and to make sure that they're not exposed to additional unwanted noise. And then the open space is where we'll be talking about mostly our parks here in town, and conservation. How are we going to conserve a lot of things. Water, how do we conserve water quality, air quality, we can talk about. Conserving agricultural land, perhaps. Mineral resources is also something that ends up in this element, as well as habitat, a lot of habitat for wildlife. So those are the 7 required elements, and we're going to be getting in depth into all of these. And then cities and towns are allowed to adopt additional elements. So some of the things that we've been kind of kicking around here at the staff level is an element on tourism, an additional chapter, perhaps an element on art and culture in the community. And then these other things, sustainability and historical community character, they could be an element, but some of them, like particularly sustainability, tends to it'll be involved in circulation, because we're talking about policies and programs for pedestrian and bicycle, and reducing vehicle miles traveled, and emissions from cars. And so sustainability can also be in the conservation. So these things we might actually want to, in some ways that some towns do this, is kind of identified as a theme, and then as we go through the general plan, we'll identify those policies and programs that are related to this theme, with like a little green leaf, for example, for sustainability. But this is one of the things we want to do also, is kind of fold in a lot of the climate action plan policies and programs into the general plan as well. So we'll, again, be talking more about this, bringing kind of an outline to you and going through that. But I just wanted, again, to give you kind of a flavor of what's in store. So all of our chapters, we're going to have some background text. We'll be drawing on this text. We're going to be talking about the workbook and the existing conditions reports, but that's got a lot of information, just kind of talking about what we have now. we'll be identifying existing and future issues, and then we move into the goals, policies, and programs part of that each chapter. So I might as well talk a little bit about goals, policies, and programs now because we're going to be spending a lot of time on them. So a goal is a description of the general desired result that the town would like to achieve through implementing the general plan. Here's an example. Provide parks and play fields for all age groups through the community. And this isn't specific to Yountville at all. This is just something I've pulled from another general plan. So then the policy comes underneath the goal. A policy is a specific statement that guides decision making. So it can set up a standard that the town is going to use, that the town council or staff will use when they review development proposals or look at infrastructure improvements or take other town actions. So a policy here would be, underneath the goal would be, develop a network of parks within walking distance of all neighborhoods as feasible. So now we have a standard. We want to have parks within walking distance of all neighborhoods. And then the program itself is actually an action or a procedure or technique that the town is going to take in order to implement that policy. So, for my example here, the program is explore creation of new neighborhood parks in underserved neighborhoods. So that's actually that is the action that the town is going to take. So just to kind of keep that in mind, I know that might feel a little bit in the weeds right now, but again, we're going to be talking a lot about policies and programs, so you can kind of understand the difference between those. So that is the end of my overview of the general plan. Does anybody have any questions that I could answer? Yes, Davio?
Just as a point of clarification, are we looking to the future to 2037? Is that kind of the mission of this general plan?
So we don't, we're not going to actually have like an end date or an expiration date for the plan, but generally we're looking at the next 20 years. Yes.
And one other point of clarification. When you look at goals, policies, and programs, there's bound to be some kind of economic requirement for some of these things. Is someone from the city going to provide some sort of guidance for budgets? Because I know, being on a lot of different committees, it's really nice to just dream about all kinds of fabulous things we can do. But there's going to be some kind of economic reality to these. So will there be somebody who will sort of calm us down if we get a little bit too far out there financially?
I think that's an excellent question. And I think, although I haven't talked to staff about this yet, but one of the ways I've seen this done in other communities is at the end in the appendix to have kind of an implementation table, which actually identifies who's going to be responsible for it. And then when there's a cost associated with a particular program, to identify that cost. And then also to identify, well, where's that money going to come from? Will it come from a general plan? Is it going, the general fund, I should say? Will it come from particular grants or from some kind of tax measure? And so to identify a funding source, and then also to identify actions that need to be taken in order to implement it. Like, do we need to adopt an ordinance? Do we have to make a plan? Are we coordinating with other agencies, that sort of thing? So we'll identify, I think we should be identifying all of the costs, and then that can be brought forward to the council, to the committee, and also to the council when they make decisions about how they want to prioritize implementation of the programs. It really comes in handy then as well.
Thanks.
Yes, Boyd. Well, we can certainly talk about land use, and so I think we'll be able to address those questions through the land use element. The housing element is really talking about zoning land for residential use and looking at, so if there's a lot that's in the housing element that's already identified for residential use, we need to leave that for residential use, so we can't change that to commercial, for example. There's a lot of policies and programs in there about how do we make housing more affordable. They're probably, they're good programs and policies. They're probably not something we want to change, but we can look at anything, and if we need to make a change, we can. It's just that it has to then go back to the State Department for their review. Yes. Eric. Mm-hmm.
Access into that portion of the element, not affect the reporting of the how many people are that should be required to meet very low, housing requirements and stay away from nitty gritty, but talk about goals and policy.
Okay, we'll definitely look at that. Questions over here? No?
I assume that later we'll look at the added list that you talked about. You had the required list of things and then the added list of things.
Yep.
Things missing from that. We'll be able to talk about that later, right?
Yes. Yes, we will. Absolutely. Those are just suggestions, right? Yeah. Okay. So I guess we'll move on to our next part of the presentation here, which is going to be on the workbook. And I'm going to give it to Peter.
Thanks. Thank you. Good to be here. The workbook that you all have is what I'm going to briefly introduce here. So it's kind of great. You have a prop. I'll try to sort of walk us through it. That's how I've organized the presentation. The workbook has 4 chapters. None of these are mandated by state law. In fact, this whole workbook exercise is kind of unique. It doesn't happen all the time with a general plan process. And the purpose of it, which is one of the things that we talk about in the introduction, the first chapter, is to, I think, examine what Yountville is like now, what has brought it to where it is, kind of reflect the community in a way that is very accessible and relevant to the general plan. So to capture people in Yountville, to capture your interest in your community, and to reflect it back in a way that is relevant to the kind of decisions that will be being made in the general plan. So it's partly informative, but it's not a comprehensive sort of information document in the way that some of the work that Beth will be producing pretty soon is going to be a sort of a more comprehensive informational document, though this has some aspect of that. It's also looking at broader trends that may affect Yountville, and like you were talking about, recognizing how, in a way, how little we know about what life will be like in 20 years, and doing as well as we can to understand the trends that are beginning to shape how cities and towns are changing, how settlement patterns and the way people are living are changing. And the workbook is intended to, I think, it's for you, it's for the town council, and it's also for residents in general. It's meant to be attractive and accessible. So that's its purpose. We seem to have lost. Is it behind me still? Yes. So the next chapter is about the region, which the setting, I guess, is what we're calling the chapter. And obviously in Yountville, the region is so important to the way the town feels and its identity and the reasons a lot of you may have come here, often a long time ago. And so we're trying to, in this chapter, give a little snapshot of what makes the Napa Valley what it is. Talking a little bit about, the early days of the winemaking industry, the role that agricultural preservation has played, and the phenomenon of sort of agritourism and wine tourism and how that has affected Yountville, looking at that regionally. We then drill into what the planning area is, and I will confess this plan is actually, this map, the PowerPoint is a day old, and we've corrected a mistake, but the planning area is now just a tiny bit larger. It's including the town boundary and this little fragment of Domaine Chandon that has been included for planning purposes. But the point is, the town, what we will be doing a plan for is basically town limits plus this little fragment, and maybe it's the visitor center portion of Domaine Chandon, and I'm not sure I can accurately capture why that's included, but no, it's actually in that little nook. It's that little square in that nook. Yep. Yes. So the shape of the town may not be what maybe you all know this, I don't know. But it's what we think of the town, but it's also the veterans' home. So that's kind of interesting. But it's a little bit askew in the sense that we don't have very much control over what happens at the veterans' home. It's just not in our jurisdiction. So it's in the planning area, but at the same time it kind of isn't. Yes. It does. That's a good point. I wouldn't go so far as to say we have no opportunity to influence anything. I think that my understanding is that the town has an ongoing relationship with the State Department that manages the State Department of Veterans Affairs, I think. And so there's a dialogue. And so the State Department of Veterans Affairs, as they continue to just look at what they have and their services and what they need, the town will, I think, it won't be taken by surprise if there's a change. And so at that point there will be an opportunity for people here to have input into what happens there. But it's not going to be the focus for this general plan. I think that's fair to say. Also, note on the population, this number is, I believe, it's the 2017 estimate from the California Department of Finance. We don't usually get into this level of sort of finickiness about which particular date, but given the very, very slow growth and small size of Yountville, we're going to try to be sort of, we need to make sure that we say this number comes from this, and because we need to benchmark it from a consistent point. I don't remember exactly. Yes.
So approximately 1,000 that leaves about 1,500.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think all of those are permanent residents, or people who would give that as their primary address. Right. Right. So it's people who would identify themselves as this being their primary residence. Yeah. I think so. You don't think so? Okay.
It's not correct in my neighborhood. I can tell you that. I think echoing and following this, I think it's really important to define that, because so much of at least what I know from people I talk to, we're really trying to define community in a real way rather than an abstract way. And I don't mean any offense by this, but the abstract way is 2,900 or whatever. So those full-time equivalents really do matter, I think, when it comes to goals and policies and programs, because at least from what my viewpoint is, and I'm only speaking, of course, for myself, is that I think we're here in part to try and develop that community 20 years down the road. And so the definitions, I think, become really important. Otherwise, I think we're speaking sort of in a vacuum for maybe 30 or 40% of the people who maybe wouldn't even agree with us because they're not here. And some of the policies and programs that, or goals even, that we might set forth really don't necessarily apply to them like they might to somebody who lives here full time. Mm-hmm.
With very different objectives of why they live here and come here. So.
No, I think though that for the people that are here, they're only part-time residents. They're residents here really for the love Yountville for the same reasons that we are all here probably. And so, you know, I think that they probably in many ways would have the same vested interest in maintaining things, but they obviously want the value of their property to, you know, be held high, and, you know, want everything that they came here for their getaway to remain.
I think that's one of the changes too that maybe and I think that's one of the changes that we're looking at, that we need to look at in this general plan update, because the character of that residential has changed. I mean, for many people over the last, you know, in the 70s and 80s and 90s, they would come here and buy a home with the intent of eventually retiring here. And they either bought and they just came and visited very regularly because they were from the greater Bay Area, or they rented long term and said, we're gonna retire here someday, but we're gonna provide long-term housing for the community until we decide to do that. The town's gone through a process recently where there was a little controversial about having people document who they were renting to, and there were people in the room that were very clear. They bought houses in Yountville solely and for the only purpose of short-term rental housing, to bypass the TOT to get into that BRB home away neighborhood. And I think the conversation we need to have is Yountville 20 years from now going to be not people that buy homes to retire here, but buy homes to run a business of bypassing the hotel TOT, renting for however they do it for 3 months, and how will that affect the core of our community when whole neighborhoods are BRB homes, and that's what's really changed, I think, from the. I think this is probably unique for in the last 10 years of Yountville, where the investment of the home has become a priority for people than really living here and retiring here.
I think this is going to be a central conversation for this plan, so it's great that it's coming out now. I want to try to get through this, you know, let me just keep going, get through it, and because we even cover this issue, you know, further along. So, yeah. In the interest of having maybe a longer body of conversation at the end, I think. The next chapter in the workbook is about history, and we start with I don't know how many of you might have seen the town did. I didn't, but we were told about it. We were given the materials. The town put together this timeline in 2015 for the 50th anniversary, and so we borrowed from that and we kind of expanded or winnowed it or whatever. It's a great fun to sort of go through this in detail, but starting in 1836 with these land grants to George Yount and Vallejo, and the subdivision and the town platting way back then in the 1850s, the railroad coming, the Veterans Home coming in the 1880s, and the town growing very slowly as just a farming community, then incorporating in 1965, and then of course wine country taking off, tourism coming into play, the French Laundry opening in 1994, and then I think notably in the last, since the year 2000 or so. Oh, I'm sorry, Thomas Keller buying it then. You're right. My mistake. I use that as a sort of a shorthand marker of sort of when tourism really sort of started taking, I think, sort of playing that. And then I think in the last decade plus, a lot of it public investments in the community hall and streets and parks and so on. So good stuff. I seem to have lost how far along am I? Okay. This series of 4 maps is in this chapter, showing physically the development of the town over time using USGS maps. And then we have this graph of population growth, and we don't have data for most of the town's history. But interestingly, Yountville's grown according to the census data, and we probably shouldn't have that whole conversation again right now. But according to the census data, it's grown 26% between 1970 and 2010. That's phenomenally slow. Napa County has grown 75% in that same period, and Napa County itself has been a slow growth county. So that's sort of interesting, and then even more so that Plan Bay Area, which is still in draft form, but that's the regional plan for the 9-county Bay Area region, doesn't actually project any household growth at all in Yountville. And it's sort of understandable that they wouldn't, given what we've seen in recent years. And that projection is not destiny, but that's just out there right now as a planning document. So then we go to the 4th chapter, which is the bulk of the workbook. What is Yountville today? And this section has 4 subsections which sort of mirror the element topics that we will be diving into with the general plan. So that's our community, which is about sort of the people and particularly the residential land use. The next section is on economic development, which has more to do with the tourism aspect of Yountville and the impact that has on revenues. The 3rd section is on transportation. We're calling it getting around. And then the 4th section is on quality of life, which has mostly to do with public spaces and public services. Where am I? So people, we sort of just try to take a snapshot of what makes Yountville really a unique kind of a town. I mean, there are a lot of ways, but one of those ways is that, largely because the Veterans Home is included in town limits, the population here is strikingly old compared to a regular normal town, let's say. But I think that would be interesting then to pull those 2 populations apart and then sort of see, where Yountville stands in that regard. But many fewer households with children compared to, for example, Napa, according to, I think this is the American Community Survey data, which is a little bit more estimated, but it's also more recent. There are 136 households with children here. That's helpful to know for the school, and that's another subject that I think I've heard a lot of concern about. The chapter talks about the housing stock here. Apparently 50% of housing units in Yountville, and this doesn't include any of the housing at the Veterans Home, 50% of the housing units are single-family detached, which is kind of surprising. It's actually relatively low. It's lower than it is in Napa County by a large margin. And I think the reason for that is largely to do with the manufactured home communities that are here.
Are they considered detached homes?
They're actually not as a sort of a housing type. Then their group quarters question is kind of interesting. A lot of people in Yountville live in institutional housing because of the Veterans Home. It's a very unique thing. And the question finally that we started to tap into, 17% of housing units in Yountville are quote unquote vacant. and something like 2/3 of those were classified as having a temporary or a seasonal or a recreational use. So this is from 2010, so that starts to get into, but I think doesn't fully reflect the concern that people have here about second homes. That these are not really vacant houses, these are second homes primarily.
How is that determined?
The census form has a bunch of categories for different types of vacancy, and one of those is for seasonal recreational use.
I'd like to point out, because you asked about this, in the housing element, which is on the website, and I'll put it on the Envision website, it has a lot of this information, like what you were pointing out, the number of houses, the number of beds in the veterans home, and then the population, so you can go back and truth check out those numbers before the next time, but those are the real numbers, they're not big kids.
The workbook shows on 2 pages, one following the next, 2 maps that look similar but are different and kind of a relevant way for what we're going to be embarking on. The first one is called Existing Land Use. Some of you are going to know all about these maps, so bear with me. But existing land use is what actually exists on the ground. It's parcel by parcel. How do we describe what exists on that parcel? It's descriptive. And the next map is what the general plan, and in Yountville's case, the general plan and the zoning code are actually the same. So what is the general plan and the zoning code designation for each property? And those tend to be a little bit more generalized. And so, for example, in Yountville, you have this zoning district called Old Town Historic. So it connotes a certain mix of housing types, actually, and sort of has something to say about the form of that housing. So that general plan map is going to be possibly the most important outcome of this exercise to update this map. Just sort of very briefly, thinking about demographics as much as we can look into the crystal ball, and what we're beginning to see is that households are changing in composition, and there are fewer children. The birth rate has gone down in the United States. People are living longer, so overall the population is getting older. The previous largest generation is in that sort of wave of retirement right now, generally. And all of these things, especially kind of converging and having an effect on what kind of housing people need and want. Often, smaller units are meeting the needs of people in a way that wasn't always, they weren't always seen as a positive. But various kinds of housing, a diversity of housing to meet the needs of a changing population, I think is sort of the key here. Moving on to the next section, economic vitality. This is a key point. Yountville is very different from most communities, and most people here probably know this, in the sense that property taxes aren't actually the most important component of funding municipal services. They're actually a very small component, 14%. The rest of the general fund is funded, or most of the rest of the general fund is actually funded by transit occupancy taxes and sales tax from the tasting rooms and restaurants. So that's sort of an extraordinary opportunity for Yountville, and it has allowed the town to create some really high quality public services and places. And the town has been, I think, really careful about using that money, has balanced budgets continuously. But it also sort of seems to indicate that we need to be careful, because this tourism thing, is it going to last? We don't know. An important question for the general plan to address is the amount of growth that we anticipate happening and where it can be accommodated. And that's both residential growth, which is the subject of the housing element, but also thinking about commercial needs. And so this map is showing vacant land that we might consider underutilized because it's, let's say, a single house on a very large lot. And the third and fourth categories here are agricultural land that is either zoned for other uses, commercial or residential, or agricultural land that is actually still zoned for agriculture but is in town limits. So these are sort of our categories for potential likely change. I think we must add that commercial areas along Washington Street might also change. That the density, we might also consider that density and building form. There's opportunity, there's potential for those to change, particularly sort of downtown. And why grow? And this is sort of getting at getting back to that trends to watch about housing, and also about getting back to the discussion that we're having about concerns about people not being able to live here. I think the key thing is being able to support a diverse community, young families, empty nesters, all kinds of people, the workforce who come, who work here, because Yountville is out of reach for a lot of people, so that's going to be a key thing. Also, being able to continue to sustain a strong economy here is critical for the quality of life that everyone enjoys. Trends to watch. We looked at a few things, and there are so many things that you could say about the changing lifestyles or changing preferences or whatever. We're saying that walkability has really grown as a feature that people really are compelled by and want to live in a walkable environment. People also in surveys have said that they love to live in rural areas and small towns more than they actually do. So that's that's something that I think we need to keep in mind, that even if Yountville right now is declining in population, it is the kind of place that people say they want to live. So the demand is probably there. Small is big, that refers to, I don't know if any of you guys came to, I think it's probably several of you were at Jim Hyde's presentation, which I happened to be at too, at the very beginning of the speaker series. And this sort of diagram is from him. It's about the sort of power of creating big change with small projects, pop-up businesses, crowdsourced funding, that kind of thing. Sometimes the biggest thing that we have in mind, the biggest policy, isn't going to have the biggest impact. Sometimes the biggest impact is going to be something that we don't expect is going to have a big impact. And then I think we need to keep in mind that Napa Valley agriculture, the value of it is just incredibly big, both directly and indirectly through tourism. And it's not obviously something that we control here, but it will have an impact on Yountville. Getting around, interestingly, Yountville has a lot more jobs than residents, so there's a lot more commuting into Yountville than out. Commuting in on this map is represented by the orange color, and people are coming mostly from Napa, Solano County, and also interestingly here, I think 10% of Yountville residents who work walk to work. That's very high for the United States. And another 20% work at home. And that's also high. So Yountville really captures that opportunity, that sometimes that dream that a lot of people have of being able to work at home or have that kind of lifestyle. Christine talked a little bit about complete streets, and I think again Yountville already has really a pretty cool balanced network. Its street network is pretty accessible to people on bikes and on foot. But there's probably room for improvement, and we can probably identify some things. The general fund expenditures, I think, is interesting. It's much more balanced, let's say, than the sources of money are how it's being used. It's 18% to public works, which is the streets, sidewalks, paths. 15% to public safety, which is the agreements with Napa County for fire and police. 17% to parks and recreation. 12% to planning, building, and housing, which is funding what we're doing now. And I'm not sure where the public art funding comes from, but that's a really cool feature here. Trends to watch. Auto ownership is changing. People are talking about this a lot. Obviously, both the technology of driving and ownership patterns, ownership kind of model may change over the next 20 years. Walking and biking, again, are legitimate forms of transportation more and more. And the streets themselves have come to be recognized as public space, not just facilities for moving vehicles through. So there's a lot of opportunity to rethink, and Yountville already has, how sidewalk spaces look and feel and what we can get out of streets. And then public health being a focus, people recognizing that the way we design our built environment has actually a pretty big impact on how healthy we are, because it affects whether we walk around, whether we get exercise. I guess those are the sort of the main things. I look forward to getting feedback from all of you. The workbook, obviously, I think it looks nicer in color, but there you have it, and I hope that it can be a good sort of conversation starter for the plan. Shall we?
I don't know if we already mentioned this, but we're going to be having the workbook printed, so it's going to be nice and glossy, and we were just finalizing it and haven't been able to do that. So it will be ready for you at the next meeting, and it will be in color. But at least you have something to start with, and we will be sending out the link to you as well, so you can look at it on your computers. Does anybody have any questions for? Sure, that would be great. Thank you. And we want you to kind of read it over the next month and digest it, and then we'll come back and we'll kind of talk more about the issues and a vision for Yountville at that time. And so we're hoping that this is going to help inform those conversations that we have next time. Okay, any other questions? Yes.
I just want to say good job. I think it looks nice. It looks really good. It's thorough. It's informative. It has different information in it than I expected. So thank you.
Thank you. And Eric. We have more to present to you, but okay, we are going to be talking about like future meetings and how we're going to get through all the material we have to get through to. So I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. All right. So the next thing we wanted to talk about is I was going to pass this over to Beth. You've got your microphone already. Beth is going to talk about the existing conditions report. So one of the things we have is the workbook to kind of inform our work. The other thing is much more technical. It's called the existing conditions report. It's something that our EIR consultant has done. So I'm going to let Beth just chat about that a little bit.
So you will receive a series of existing conditions reports, and they'll be provided to you prior to each of your meetings, and they'll focus on topics that you'll be addressing at those meetings. And they establish the current conditions in the town, and then they also provide the regulatory framework for the topics that are being addressed in the existing conditions report. So they'll identify pertinent federal and state laws, town ordinances, and then the existing general plan framework for addressing that topic. So there will be a lot of data. There's a lot of text and tables. It's not as user-friendly as the workbook, but each one will be a very informative document. They'll address land use and socioeconomics, community services and facilities, conservation, circulation, cultural issues, noise, hazards and safety, and fiscal. And each of these documents, with the exception of the socioeconomic discussion and the fiscal discussion, will serve as the basis for establishing the baseline conditions in the town for the environmental impact report. So we'll take the information from these documents and pull it into the environmental impact report when we're looking at what the changes are in circulation, what the air quality effects are, what changes happen in land use, what are the impacts on public services and utilities that are associated with implementing the general plan. And so the general plan is considered a project under the California Environmental Quality Act, which is referred to as CEQA, and the EIR is the environmental impact report. And so it's the environmental impact report is an informational document that's intended to provide the decision makers with identifying impacts that would result from implementing the general plan. And it's not for the general plan or against the general plan. It's just data on what impacts are less than significant, what impacts are significant and unavoidable. And a lot of EIRs that you have probably seen, if you like reading EIRs, are typically based on development projects. And so they'll include a lot of mitigation measures that would change how that development project is implemented or guide how that development project is implemented. For the general plan, we're preparing a self-mitigating document, so we will be working all of the mitigation into the policies and actions that live in the general plan. So you don't have a general plan prepared and then an EIR prepared subsequently that includes mitigation measures that change the direction of your general plan. And where you have the tail wagging the dog as opposed to having the general plan.
Does everybody understand what that is, mitigation measures and all that? Okay, all right, just making sure. Because sometimes, you know, go ahead.
Okay. So, and that pretty much summarizes what I will be doing. So you will be receiving the existing conditions report. The EIR itself will be prepared after the draft general plan has come out of the process from your group. So you'll see that later on in the process. So if you have any questions about the existing conditions report or the EIR, I'd love to answer them.
So I have a few more slides here if we can pull them up. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to just kind of talk about some of the housekeeping things. First of all, the structure of future meetings, we're on that item here on our agenda. And so the first thing to talk about is the Brown Act. And the Brown Act is something that it requires all meetings, all legislative bodies to hold open and public meetings. And that includes like the town council and the zoning design review board. And because you are a council appointed group, you are also considered a legislative body that is subject to the Brown Act. So our meetings have to be open and public. We have to have an agenda, which we will be publishing. We're going to be taking minutes, and those minutes will be available to the public as well. The important thing to remember is that the big issue here is that we want to make sure that you don't have unintended meetings. And so a meeting is a majority of members of the committee. So our committee has 9 people. That means the majority is 5 people. So when you are out at some event and you're all chatting, I hope you talk about the weather and you talk about where you're going on vacation next, but that you don't talk about what we are doing here, anything of substance that we are going to be addressing here in this meeting, in this forum. So, and you can talk to 1 or 2 other people, but as soon as you start talking to 5 people, then we have an unintended meeting, and that meeting has to be open and public. We need an agenda for it, etc. The problem comes into being when one person talks to one person, that person talks to another person, that person talks to, and pretty soon you have a chain, what we call a serial meeting, and you have 5 people talking, and then that's a violation of the Brown Act. Another problem can happen if one person talks to this person, and then this person and this person separately. That another 5 people. That's also a violation of the Brown Act. So again, just the easiest thing to do is to just avoid talking about matters that are under deliberation by this committee. And another thing is when we send out emails to you, if you don't hit the reply all button, then we won't have an unintended meeting. And if it's a meeting, if we're sending out an email about where we're going to meet next or what everybody's availability is, that's a different matter. But if you're providing like comments on any of the materials that we send to you, just reply to staff. You can reply to all of staff, but don't reply to everybody else, okay? Anybody have any questions about the Brown Act? Yes?
On the emails, I know we're using our personal emails, and I'm getting increasingly uncomfortable about that, just because it feels like this is official business and it's getting mixed in with my personal emails. Are there going to be a different email account for us to have this sent to rather than our personal emails?
We were not planning on it,
okay.
But it's something we are considering for the different boards and commissions. I'm not sure if this one rises to that level, but I will raise it as an item. It potentially does make all of your own personal emails searchable under
by government
Public Records
body.
Act.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm very uncomfortable with that.
So.
And that's the other thing, is to set up another account. I don't know if you use Gmail.
Gmail or some other.
It's still my personal, so.
If we set it up just for this, it was going to be Yountville, Lynn, at whatever Gmail, you have just that and have only this stuff under that account. And then it will put your other accounts.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
The purpose of this group is to set up goals, and so as we have meetings, I'm curious how I mean, the hope for the group is to develop consensus, but also it's to find out how, and because you talked about the Brown Act, we can have serial meetings or email each other to find out from meeting to meeting, how do we get a sense as you plan in the future of where everyone else is at, and then how do you think or anticipate we'll develop consensus? Will we vote on issues to give you a direction for, or so that's one. I'd like to know how we find out how other people feel about an issue, and then as we're talking about it, how we give you direction.
Right. So we'll be talking about everything here. Everybody will get an opportunity to talk, and we will definitely be taking votes, particularly on the policies and programs that we're developing, and so we'll vote on them, and then in order to pass, we'll need a quorum, a majority of the members that are here will have to vote on it. And the voting is really important because I've seen meeting summaries of these kinds of committees, and you go back and you just don't know what the actual direction was. So we will be voting for sure.
Are the restrictions in the Brown Act having to do with any discussion whatsoever, or actions being taken, or data being collected, or you talked about referring to finding the documents, looking at the different and collecting data? If you're sharing some responsibilities in doing that, that's sharing with other people. How what are the restrictions?
We can have we can have a subcommittee. You can talk to one or two other people. If you want to talk to something, but you just can't. You got to make sure that it doesn't go beyond that to 5 people.
So the purpose of that really is so that the purpose of government is to be open for people to hear, and so we shouldn't be. The purpose of it in the end is to have a particular policy that 5 people are basically deciding how they're going to vote on an issue, but it seems like when you're talking about general information, that's not really creating a serial decision. That's really what we're.
Yeah, but we don't want to get into any kind of gray area. So if there's information though that you want to share, you can always send it to staff, and staff can send it out to the entire group. Okay. So I kind of already talked about agendas and minutes. The agenda will be sent out to you, I believe, the Friday before. What we're aiming for will also be posted on the website. We will be taking minutes. The minutes aren't going to be verbatim minutes. We are recording this, so you could listen to that if you wanted to. They're going to be more like summary minutes, and then we'll certainly have all of the actions that are taken by the committee, by the tag on there. The quorum, again, is a majority of the members that are present here, and we will be voting on all of the items. Okay, tag meetings. So this is the first. We've had the first one. The next one is August 10th. Now the plan here is to take each element and talk about each element at each meeting, and we wanted to start off with kind of an easier one is the safety and noise. So we'll be doing that on August 10th. The meetings are all right now scheduled for 6 to 8, but we're wondering, do we want to think about changing the times, making it earlier? Can people get here earlier if we'd like to do that, or no? 6 to 8. Okay. That was easy. So we'll continue in 6 to 8. September 14th, I cannot be at that meeting because I'm going to be out of the country. So I'm wondering if we could change that to the 21st or the 28th. And I don't know if everybody has their calendar in front of them. We can either do this, we could do this by email later. Yes, Davio.
Should we all be telling you if we are going to be out of the country like you?
Yeah, and that would be helpful to know.
I'm going to be out of the country with you in September.
Okay, all right. So you'd like the 21st to the 28th as well, or will you not be back?
I won't be here at all in September.
Okay, all right. Oh, I wish I was going to, no. Okay, so no Davio for September. Any of those other dates conflict for anybody else?
I prefer the 21st or 28th, but...
Okay.
I'd already let you know that I wouldn't be here for the 10th. Oh, sorry. Let you know that I wouldn't be here for August 10th.
Okay. Any other conflicts that we should know about? Boyd? Okay. Well, we want to make sure everybody could, and it sounds like you can't, so.
Well, I should say when I work for 5:30.
Okay, all right. So, so that's good. We'll just do it 6 o'clock. So how about the 21st of September? Can everybody make the 21st? Yeah? You don't know off the top of your head? You want to check your calendar and then we can kind of confirm by email? Okay. All right, great. So the 21st, hopefully, of September, we'll be talking about conservation.
Can I just step back a minute?
Sure.
Of those two dates, the 28th is a Thursday, and if that's easier for most people's schedules, that's why we provided that as an option. We couldn't provide the week ahead on a Thursday because PREC meets, so the 21st is a Thursday.
That's a Thursday.
They're both
Oh,
Thursdays.
yeah. Was that
Okay,
wrong?
They're both a week apart. Yes, actually looking at it now, I think the 21st isn't
Okay.
a feasible date.
Okay.
The 28th is our Yountville Out Loud event, so
What time is that event?
5:30 to 7:30.
So it's not the 21st, it's the 20th that we're looking at then?
We'll email you all.
Okay, let's do that. Let's try to resolve this by email.
I'm sorry for not noticing that, and obviously they're a week apart up there, so
Right.
sorry.
Yeah, I think we did talk about it and
Yeah.
I missed it.
Okay.
Okay. October 12th, we will talk about land use. We have land use 1 and housing. And then we'll actually have a public workshop after that. And then we'll come back on November 5th to talk about land use again. That's kind of the bigger topic. And we want to hear from the public and get their feedback and then come and bring it back to you again to kind of hash it out and make some final decisions about land use policies. And we'll also talk about circulation in that meeting. Then we're going to take a break in December, come back in January to talk about the optional elements, and then we'll have a final draft to review in February. This is a really aggressive schedule, but hopefully we can, yes?
November 5th is a Sunday.
November 5th is a Sunday.
I think you might have met November 9th. Yes.
Thank you. November 9th. Yeah, it's supposed to be the second Thursday, the second Thursday of the month. Yeah, and you know what? I think one of the things I think we should do is talk about the outline and the elements at the next meeting, and you know, if we need an additional meeting in the end of this schedule, we'll have to deal with it then. I mean, this is kind of the ideal schedule that we can get through all of these elements like this, but we'll see what happens. Okay, so I will move on. So the public workshop. So the first workshop we're planning is in August. It's right around the corner, August 4th. And so for that workshop, we're going to have an overview of the general plan. We want to do some kind of activity where we start to identify issues that are important to the community. And we also want to do a community visioning exercise. And we're going to do that here as well at the next meeting. So that's August 24th. And then October 19th, as I mentioned before, is a community workshop on land use options. So we'll talk more about this at the next meeting. So I just wanted to kind of get these on your calendar. What times are we talking about? Do we have the 6 to 8 for both of them? 6 to 8 o'clock. Okay, so for future meetings, I just kind of want to run through some of the materials that we're going to be providing you for each of these meetings. Like I said, the first one is going to be on safety and noise. And so Sandra is passing out these matrices, and we're going to be providing this for each meeting. And in this matrix, what we're doing is we are evaluating all of the policies and programs that are in the existing general plan. So we've gone through, staff has gone through them, identified what has been done, what's been accomplished. If it hasn't been accomplished, why not? It was not, the program was not implemented. And then we have staff recommendations for how to revise these policies and programs. So they might be, and we have them color coded as well. So if they're green, that means we just want to retain the policy or program as it is. If it's yellow, we're suggesting a revision, and we've actually gone and made some word choices for these revisions. And then if we want to delete it, it's in red, or it's kind of pink actually. And then we have a bunch of new programs that we've added that are in white. Now, a lot of these new programs are just because of things that we know that have changed. They might be in response to new laws. But these are, of course, they're all open to discussion. So what we're going to ask is, well, actually, let me finish this up first. So we're going to be passing these out at all of the meetings. We'll also provide electronic copies for you so you can look at them electronically. We'll be providing you with the applicable existing conditions reports that Beth was talking about. So we have we have 3 of them that we want to provide for this next round. There's one on hazards, safety and hazards. There's another one on noise. And then there's a third one on community facilities. There's actually a couple of sections within that are applicable. They're about fire and police services and drainage. So you can read, some of them are pretty technical, but if you're interested, please read through them. You might want to just kind of focus on what the town regulations are. There's a section about what the town's already doing, what the ordinances might be that are pertain to that. There's also some really kind of interesting maps in those that you might want to look at, and just to get an understanding of what the existing conditions are and what potential issues we have. So we'll be providing that, and also if there's any other background material, we'll provide that in advance as well. Some of the things we might be just providing you links to material that you'll be able to find on the website. For example, all the old general plans on there. So if you want to read perhaps the existing general plan, you'll be able to find that there. We also have, there's other plans as well that might be of interest to you. You can get as deep in the weeds as you want, but there's not an expectation that you're going to read all of this material, except for these evaluation matrices, because we really want you to kind of review them and be prepared to discuss them at the next meeting. There's also, I don't know if everybody went to all of the speaker series, but there's a lot of great background information there too. So we might point you to, there was one that was done on transportation, and point you to that one. So even if you went there, you might want to refresh your memory, because there's a lot of background material. We don't have time with just 2-hour meetings to kind of do a lot of background, rehashing a lot of information that's out there already. Yes.
I'm not sure how to ask this question, but has there been an attempt to gather or quantify information from the subpopulations of this town? For example, the veterans group, the retired people that live here full-time, the people with children, the different groups that we were talking about earlier, collecting what's working from them, what's not working for them, what they would like, and sort of quantifying that out. Has there been...
There is a town survey that was done. Maybe you want to talk about the town survey? I don't...
So there was a town survey about a year ago where residents weighed in on different elements of the community and how it compared to other communities, and that is a report that is available on the Envision Yountville webpage that gives a sort of baseline sense of how people feel. Kendall is mentioning the outreach that we're going to provide as we get a little deeper into this process, to go out to different groups in the community, like the Veterans Home or the mobile home parks, and try to get their input on things. As we move toward the workshops and we have items of discussion, we'll also be reaching out with questionnaires and surveys and trying to get input. As we start this process early on, this will be where the discussion starts, and we don't have a lot to share with you. And while I have the mic, before I pass it on, I'll just mention that the review of each of these matrices is staff's review and experience based on these programs and policies and how they're working and what our suggestions are, but it's not exhaustive. If we've missed anything, at the next meeting would be the time to raise it, and we'll incorporate new and other ideas as well.
So we will be going out in September and October and then coming back to this group and giving a full report of what the outcomes were. We will be talking to specifically the Veterans Home, the school district, local community groups, the Chamber of Commerce, individual homeowners associations, and trying to get that socioeconomic cross-section, because there are a lot of people who were very happy with the turnout during the speaker series, but still there were another 1,900 people that didn't attend, so we want to make sure that we get to them as well. And as I say, we'll be doing those largely through September and October, when we have a little more to share with them and are able to get their input in a meaningful way that you can then weigh in on.
I have a question about this. I'm sorry. So at the meeting, at our next meeting, what will you expect us to do? Come walk in with opinions on the actions that you want us to take, or to be prepared to have a discussion about it, or maybe just outline how you see a meeting going? I'm just a little scared.
I know, right? That's why we wanted to start off with one of the easier ones, because it can be a little overwhelming. And this is kind of where I'm going with the rest of this presentation, rest of my slide. So what we're asking is that you review the material and that you flag any items that you have for discussion. So anything you want to discuss, and then if you have anything else, any other issues or another idea for a program, once you get into this groove, you'll start it'll start feeling more comfortable for you.
For instance, on the noise, evaluation of noise element, you would expect us to read through this and then to come in with an opinion about objective number 1, where your staff is saying this is revise, and giving revisions, that we agree with the revisions, we want to revise it, or leave it alone, or we want to delete it. So we could have a different opinion?
You can absolutely have a different opinion,
okay.
Yes. And I think,
we should
and
come
some
in
of these
with
are
an
going to be
opinion.
pretty technical.
Right.
If you read the existing conditions report, you might have a little bit, a better understanding of it. But, also bring your questions, because we can have, we can talk about anything that you don't understand or you don't confuse, so that you have enough information in order to make a informed decision on them. Yes.
Yeah, I would just, if you don't mind, I think you shouldn't feel pressured to have an opinion already and to fight for it. I mean, it's about coming together and discussing it and figuring it out too.
If in advance of the meeting, if you see something in the package that you don't understand at all, don't be afraid to email on the website or to staff and say, hey, could you give me some more clarification on this before the meeting? Because it's helpful if you guys get those questions answered. It's like the housing meeting. Is this a real number? Yes, it's a real number. So you know that going in, so that's not time we have to waste.
And I know we're not allowed to talk to really each other, but can we talk to non-members of this committee? So like my neighbor,
Yes,
like,
absolutely.
what do you think about if we had a different noise ordinance?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and we really want you to be, you're kind of here because you're a voice of the community, so you should be gathering other opinions as well. Yes?
When you go and have meetings with other outside groups to gather, the information from them, will we know when those meetings are?
We likely will, yeah. When we come before these groups, we'll let you know who we're going to be talking to over the next couple of weeks. We won't post them on the website as public meetings, because they're not public meetings. Some of them are like a Rotary Club or something that it's their members. But we'll let you know, and in fact, I encourage some of you, if you have a relationship with that group or you know a group that we should be talking to let me know so we can include them on there. So the idea is, again, to be as inclusive and transparent as possible and share as much information as we can with you coming back.
So I know one of the things we talked about was the concern of the absentee resident. So do we have a way that we'll be reaching out to that group as well, like via, I don't know, a utility bill or something where they would get that and then be able to,
it's an interesting question, because largely a lot of times you can't tell the two things, but sometimes we look at the bill that's paying the water bill, let's say, but then the person that's paying the property tax bill are two different people, right? Mm-hmm. So very oftentimes we can tell if that's an absentee landlord and somebody who's renting. For the people that are using second homes, we would reach them through the traditional means, which is basically, we're not doing mail on this campaign, but we will be getting enough out there. We've had great response from the paper and whatnot, so I think we will be able to tap those folks. And then we also working with local realtors, because basically they know oftentimes if they're selling a property to someone that is going for a second home or is staying there. So the idea of setting up a smaller focus group with them. I think one of the things we heard during the speaker series, and as mentioned here, is there are quite a number of people that come here and get a townhouse or get something else and then transition into being a full-time resident. And then there are those throughout the Napa Valley that just keep it as a second home and they're not here.
Boyd, I think you had a question?
So she asked the question.
Oh, okay.
I've already had people come up to me actually with comments and questions, and so I've encouraged them to come to the meetings because there is a public comment section, but we'll see if they actually show up. But I've had plenty of interaction already. So
Great, and encourage them to come to the workshops as well. I mean, that's really, we're going to make a big effort to get as many people to those workshops as possible. Yes, Tavio.
Yeah, this is just sort of a housekeeping thing. Is most of the information going to be on the Envision Yountville page? So is all of our stuff going to be folded into that one place, so we're not looking through the town stuff to find what we need?
So these draft matrices we'll put on the website as well. So we.
The draft matrices you'll get through email, but the background documents, once those are ready, those will all be on the website. And so like right now, all of the previous general plans, as well as the last housing element, circulation element, the survey, all of that is there. We would prefer not to share the matrices outside of this group until you've had a chance to weigh in on it. Once you guys have moved a little further along and we've had a chance also to vet this through council and
ZBRD.
Then we'll go out there. And that's the kind of thing to keep in mind too, just to prepare you all, is that at the end of the day, this is a policy document that the council will be taking action on, right? So you're here because you're representing these diverse groups to give us this great input. You may all love a policy that council may go, nah, I don't think so. Or you may hate a policy and they go, well, we really want it. So you kind of have to prepare yourself mentally for that possibility. It seems like it's not going to be the case, but just to keep in mind. But anything and everything in terms of background documents are all on the Envision Yountville site. So get there early and often.
You mentioned CDRB. What is their role?
They'll be receiving presentations prior to some of the council study sessions, just to weigh in and be able to, give us their 2 cents. I believe there's also meetings planned for Parks and Recreation and for other commissions that are out there. Again, the idea is to give them the same information after you've kind of gone through it a bit. I think we're looking at them in January? So we decided? Yeah. So there'll be a complete schedule, and those will all be posted again on the website, so you can see when those things are happening. And if you choose to go to those meetings or participate, you can absolutely attend and hear what they have to say.
April for CRDB, CDB. I think what you're talking about, December, would be the first one. We were just revising our schedule earlier today. Any other questions so far? Okay. So what we'll do at each meeting, at least, I'm just talking about these matrices right now, but we'll give you an overview of kind of some of the background material, and then we'll have a discussion of the policies and programs and any other issues that are brought up. And we're going to try to keep the discussion to just the topic area. And then, again, we will have voting to determine the tag's direction on all of the items under discussion. We might be able to say, yeah, they're all good, or we might have to go line by line if they're controversial. We'll see how that goes. Okay, so preview of meeting number 2. Well, first of all, we will be reviewing the safety and noise evaluation of the policies and programs. So that's 2 elements that we're going to be tackling. And again, I hope that they're going to be fairly easy. From our discussion here, I think we should also bring forward an outline and have a discussion about the general the structure and the different elements that we're going to talk about. And then we want to have a visioning exercise. So just to kind of prepare you for that, I think if you read the workbook and then just kind of think about what you want to see 20 years from now, what this town is going to look like. What does it feel like when you walk outside? How do people interact with each other? What kinds of families are here? How people are getting around? What kind of businesses are here? Just kind of your vision for the future. And we'll have a little exercise, and the end result of this, and we want to go to the community as well, but the end result is that we need to have kind of a fairly short but good vision statement that we want to put into the general plan. And the vision is really what's guiding the entire process. So just give that some thought, kind of marinate in that, and we'll talk about that next month as well. And then the other thing, too, is that we just want to start talking, kind of just bringing forward all of your issues that we want to address. And these are kind of issues that we want to bring up at the workshop as well. So we'll be talking about that next time. I think that was my last slide. So any other questions? I think wow. Isn't that amazing? 8 o'clock on the dot. Okay. So, any other questions, concerns, anything? Yes.
Are we going to have any presentations from certain groups like NVTA, or are there going to be guests if we have questions about? I'm just curious.
Yeah, and that's not in the plan. So a lot of those, like NVTA, we're going to encourage you to go and listen to the speaker series, because there's a lot of good background information there. But if you have any specific questions, like prior to the meeting, if you could let us know what those questions are, and then if we need to have somebody here to address it, or if we can just do some research and then we'll present that in kind of that overview before we start the meeting. I think that's, again, we have a lot of material to get through, and so we're going to try to be as efficient as possible. We've got 2 hours every month, and that's not a lot of time. Any other questions? Okay, then I think we have to formally adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for coming.